Depression rarely arrives shouting. It whispers. It hides behind the tiredness that won't go away, the emptiness where joy used to live, the fake smile you show the world just to avoid questions. But Freud invites us to see something deeper. This silent pain is not a void without meaning. It's a message. Psychic suffering, according to Freud, is never random. It has a source, even if we can't name it. And when it isn't heard, it starts to scream in the only way it knows. How? Through symptoms. The persistent sadness, the numbness, the harsh self-criticism. They're not just consequences. They're a form of communication. Depression, more often than not, is the unconscious trying to speak to you. But how do you listen to a pain that doesn't use words? Freud believed that what we fail to process emotionally is repeated, displaced, transformed. And depression might be just that, a failed attempt from your unconscious to be heard. Something was lost, something was buried, something left a scar, and that scar is trying to be acknowledged. Feeling this isn't weakness, it isn't exaggeration. It's a sign that something inside you is asking for help in a way you haven't yet learned to understand. The pain, in this case, is not your enemy. It's a primitive form of language. And the more you deny it, the louder it becomes. Not because it wants to destroy you, but because it wants to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, it's saying, "Look at me," before I have to scream louder. In his 1917 essay, Mourning and Melancholia, Freud introduced a distinction that still helps us understand what we feel. Mourning, he explained, is the recognized pain that follows a clear loss. The death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, the collapse of an ideal. It's a natural process, painful but directional. We know what we lost, and over time, we can process it. Melancholia. However, the term Freud used for what we now call depression is something else. The pain is there, intense and persistent, but the reason is unclear. The person suffers, but can't name what exactly was lost. That lack of clarity makes everything heavier. In melancholia, the ego turns against itself. The part of us that organizes our sense of self begins to attack rather than protect. Instead of grieving something external, we grieve ourselves. We become both the mourner and the accused. For Freud, this isn't a flaw. It's an unconscious process, a psychic conflict that manifests as deep emotional pain. Understanding. This dynamic is crucial, not to fix everything at once, but to realize that there's a logic behind the phrase, "I don't even know why I feel this way." Melancholia, though hidden, follows a structure. And if there's structure, there's also a path through it. There's a moment when pain becomes personal. It's no longer just sadness or emptiness. It turns into an inner belief that you're worthless, a burden, that the world would be better without you. Freud saw this as the most painful expression of melancholia. When the ego, already wounded by an unknown loss, begins to attack the very foundation of self. The mind builds a harsh, relentless inner narrative. You start to believe you're unlovable, inadequate, undeserving. And the cruelest part is that the voice saying these things sounds like your own. It uses your words, your fears, your memories. But Freud reminds us, that voice is the voice of inner conflict, not your truth. The superego, the internal structure, carrying judgment and inherited expectations, becomes powerful in melancholia and acts as a merciless judge, punishing every perceived flaw. That's why someone in depression often can't defend themselves. They're under attack from within, every day, in silence. Yet that voice, however convincing, is not reality. It's a reflection of unprocessed pain. Depression is trying to say, there is something inside you that has been deeply hurt and needs compassion, not punishment. What you feel does not define who you are. Your pain is not your identity. It's a message, asking to be heard and held, not condemned. Guilt that comes with depression rarely has a clear cause. It's a quiet, blurry guilt that seems to appear out of nowhere, yet weighs as if it's always been there. Freud believed that this nameless guilt is one of the most subtle ways the unconscious communicates. When the conscious mind can't identify what has been lost, the unconscious doesn't stay silent. It answers with pain, and often with guilt. Melancholia becomes an invisible courtroom. You're accused, judged, and sentenced for something you don't understand. Yet the judgment persists day after day. According to Freud, this guilt arises from the clash between desire and internal prohibition. Something was repressed, silenced, or denied within you, and the ego, unable to process it directly, turns it into self-blame. Guilt becomes a substitute for feelings that couldn't be consciously acknowledged. It says, "You did something wrong," when in fact the pain is trying to say, "You weren't allowed to feel something real." In this sense, guilt isn't proof of wrongdoing. It's a sign of unconscious suffering. Recognizing this changes everything. Instead of drowning in that feeling, you begin to question it. Where does it come from? Whose voice is this really? What truth is hidden behind this heaviness? Rather than just enduring the guilt, you can start to listen to it and slowly turn it into awareness. Not all pain wants to be healed immediately. Some pain just wants to be seen. Depression, though it often feels like an end, might actually be your unconscious pointing to something that's been ignored for too long. Freud believed that psychic symptoms are coded messages. They don't appear randomly. They arise because something inside us couldn't find another way to exist except through suffering. That persistent sadness, that unnamed weight might be saying, "Look at me." Maybe it's an abandoned dream, a version of yourself you had to let go of, an emotional need that was never fulfilled. Depression can be your unconscious telling you that you've spent too long drifting away from who you truly are. And the more you ignore it, the louder the pain becomes, not out of cruelty, but out of insistence. Because the psyche wants to heal. It seeks balance. And when it can't do that through conscious means, it tries to get your attention any way it can. Pain, then, isn't just a symptom to be eliminated. It's a signal. It wants you to stop, to look, to ask, what part of me has been silent for too long? What is this pain trying to make me face? Maybe you'll realize that what you needed most wasn't to get rid of the pain, but to understand what it came to show you. Because sometimes, seeing is the first step toward healing. In the midst of depression, it's easy to confuse yourself with the pain. When it lasts too long, it begins to feel like your identity. You don't just feel sadness, you start to believe that you are sadness. But Freud offers us another view. That pain doesn't define who you are. It simply reveals that something within you is asking to be seen. Psychic suffering is deep, but it is a part of the process, not the whole. There's a fundamental difference between feeling pain and being the pain. Feeling it is human, but believing it is all you are becomes an emotional trap. When you begin to listen to the pain, not reject it, not fear it, but truly listen, something shifts. You take on a new role, not the victim, but the observer. And in that shift, a breath of freedom enters. You separate yourself from the inner critic, the guilt, the shadow, not to ignore them, but to recognize them as parts, not your entirety. Freud believed the unconscious doesn't disappear. It transforms when brought into awareness. That transformation begins the moment you realize pain is speaking, but you are the one capable of listening with compassion. You are not failure. You are not emptiness. You are not your diagnosis. You are the one who, despite everything, is still here. And that, simply being here, is already the beginning of rebuilding. It's easy to believe that depression is against you, that it's a dark force trying to destroy you from the inside. But Freud teaches us something different. Depression is not your enemy. It's a request, a deep, painful, but deeply human request for something within you to finally be heard. Every psychic pain has meaning. And when it repeats, when it becomes a symptom, when it settles like a shadow that won't lift, it's not trying to end you. It's trying to reach your awareness. Freud believed the unconscious insists. It wants to come to light. And depression may be the most extreme way of expressing what has been buried for too long. That's why the path isn't to silence the pain, but to listen to it. With curiosity, with courage, with compassion. You don't have to face this alone. And you no longer have to believe that pain is proof of failure. It may in fact be a sign that something within you still wants to live. The first step is to listen, with respect, with presence, with the willingness to say, I don't understand it all yet, but I'm here. And sometimes, that's all it takes to begin. If this message resonated with you in any way, subscribe to the channel. Each video here is a space for listening, reflection, and acknowledging the emotions we often hide. Leave a comment below sharing what spoke to you, or simply write, I'm here. Sometimes, naming your pain is already an act of courage. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. You are not alone. And together, we can begin to turn pain into awareness.